So welcome. My name's Alex Douziech. I'm the founder of the Center for Plants and Culture. I'm joined here with Derek Haynes, aka the Crazy Botanist, aka the Chocolate Botanist. Tell them a little bit more about what you do.
What do? I disrupt our preconceived notions of what it means to be a scientist, what it means to be a botanist, and what it means to be traditional. There are so many ways for us to express ourselves botanically while still representing scientific fact and not folly.
Absolutely. And I understand it. This is something that I've appreciated about your page. And I know I've been following you and you've been following me. And it's like we really connected most recently over
Yes.
this one post
Oh yes.
about Carolus Linnaeus. And now we're going to get into it, but I feel like we need to give a little bit of background as far as who is Carolus Linnaeus. And
Yes.
do you want to take that away?
You know, I call him Carl.
Okay.
I call him Carl. That's what I call him because you got to be on the first name basis with some of these demons. When you are dealing with Linnaeus, he is the father, quote unquote, of binomial nomenclature. It was a two-name system for knowing what an organism is. So on a basic level, conceptually, my two names are Derek Haynes. I do have a middle name, but that is my business, not yours. And when you're looking at my first and last name, that is who I am. So Derek is who I am specifically, but I am a Haynes. It's pretty much based in this whole umbrella of this file folder, this folder in a folder in a folder, from kingdom down to specific organism.
And now, see, this is where I'll mention where my post comes in and looking into the works of Linnaeus, laying out the rules as far as this binomial nomenclature. It was startling to actually see and to read what he had to say about the barbarous languages and how he actually phrased any other language outside of Latin or Greek
Yes.
was barbarous and should not be included. It was part of his set of rules. And I actually have a quote that I'd like to share.
Ooh, share it with the people.
That I think really gets at the biases of this man here at this time. Quote, "No sane person introduces primitive generic names. All barbarous names are regarded by us as primitive, since they are from languages not understood by the learned."
Ain't that grand? So I think
Yes.
we even have to break this down further into one of the tenets, one of the bricks, the several types of bricks that built science up, which is racism, right?
Right.
Which is a mindset that, if I have white skin, then I have the right demeanor and attitude about something. I have the right answer. And that means that I'm going to set the tone for this science because these other people, these heathens, barbarian, whatever you want to call them, they're fools, they're morons, as we might say in North Carolina, and they don't deserve to be a part of this conversation. So when the table was set, black and brown people, indigenous people were not allowed there, right? And that pushed us out, and that's where those rules, I believe, come from.
And the thing that continually, both surprised me and didn't surprise me is how people refuse to see that these rules that he set out could possibly displace or erase indigenous names for plants. And when we look that so many of these plants came from cultures that only had oral traditions.
Yes.
There was no written
Not at all.
recording. Who decided what names got recorded, what those names should be, and if any of these barbarous names entered this kind of canon, they had to be Latinized. It had to kind of fit with their sensibilities.
Those names, that culture, that history, the importance that those plants meant to those people who lived around them, those indigenous peoples who lived around them, was wiped away. And the thing that I think we have to really state off, because I can see people already in the comments being like, but the system works, and they're typing like this, because that's what they do. When we're talking about this, dear viewers, we are not saying that we should dismantle the entire system that Linnaeus has put up, because even as we're looking in today's times, the system is updating and the system is changing.
Yes.
So when we look at the rosemary plant, for example, that used to be Rosmarinus officinalis or officinale, when we see that plant and we see it now as Salvia rosmarinus. That is us changing not based on the physiology of the plants, how they look physically, but we're now looking at the additional information we can get from what they do genetically or how they appear genetically. So we're already shifting what Linnaeus couldn't do in that time. So it shouldn't be a far stretch to shift what he wouldn't do in that time by, again, bringing back to the forefront the naming systems, or again, the names in general, the synonymous names these people have. In the same way that we even erase some common names that are offensive. It shouldn't be a thing. It shouldn't be disgusting to somebody. Somebody shouldn't be sitting there fuming at the face, turning red because of this conversation.
Science isn't fixed. It's like, what if there was any field that we could actually be critical in? Shouldn't it be the sciences?
It should be. It should be, and it shouldn't be a fight or an argument. I shouldn't have to troll you in the comments to let you see my point. It shouldn't happen. It should just be, you know what, the system does work, but it has some ugliness in it. What can we do to fix it? That should be our conversation. And some of that, those names are gone forever, so some of that we can't bring back.
Now that's exactly what you just hit on, that those names, some of those names are gone forever. And I mean, this is the thing that even in the side comments and conversations I've had, that it's been very hard for people to see, because they continue to look at, well, we do have some indigenous names still, so therefore they didn't get erased.
Yeah.
But it's like, you cannot compare. I mean, it's like saying if colonialism didn't just erase people's culture, people's traditions, let alone the mass genocide that it caused. But it's like, we have to talk about the power dynamic. I mean, this is what it continues to go back to. Who were the gatekeepers? They called us in. They called us in. They know we're talking.
They're dropping in the squat. So look, just like we should be easily adaptable and innovative in science, we had to innovate and change our location. But we're going to go back into this thing of Linnaeus, right?
We should talk a little bit about how he even structured and classified human beings based off of their temperaments.
These temperaments and these descriptions he gave of the different races was embedded in science, and that later became embedded in culture, right? So we're not even just talking about the science of it all, but we're talking about how that leads into culture. And frankly, if I could just give a hot take, you know, this ain't on Twitter, so they ain't gonna cancel me. If we were talking about religiosity, and we were talking about Christianity and how it was barbaric and hurt people, I think a lot of people would be more willing to say, yep, you're right, and go for that, versus the science that is their faith. Therefore, it becomes faultless from religious standpoints to scientific standpoints. Everything in between that and outside of it.
Absolutely. And there was this almost reaction, and I've got this even in some of the DMs of like, well, sure, he might have been a racist dude, but I mean, this kind of post revealing his biases does more harm to science.
Yeah, no, it doesn't. Science as a critical thinking piece is beautiful because it allows us to look at different things and to evolve our understandings, right? We, I think, can appreciate science when it's like, my phone is now moving faster, my internet's going better, and now I take these pictures and I don't look like myself because, you know, I'm able to push a button and it snatches me and I look good, right? But when we talk about the atrocities of science and what was happening behind that, that is not science's fault. Science is an abstract concept. It cannot hurt you, right? If I unless I throw a science textbook at you. Other than that, it can't hurt you. So it's the people behind it that were the ugly people.
Why is this such a surprise for scientists? Like, do scientists not actually study the history of the sciences?
I mean, we all had to learn it, but we just keep the concepts up, right? Because the concepts are frankly what we use every day. Yeah. So the mindset in my work, my main job, of photosynthesis and plant growth and tenets of horticulture are things that I use on a continual basis, right? The science behind getting these plants up. So when we think of the history of tobacco or plants being imported, exported, medicinal botany and all of that stuff, those things again are with me because I'm an ethnobotanist, but a lot of us just don't get a chance to use them. So when we think of, you know, the great scientists behind the DNA molecule and the understanding of that, we don't keep reading the story to say one of them said that black people are basically inferior, they're unintelligent, and aliens are coming to get us all, and we come from aliens, right? Or even the prehistory to say they stole this from a woman who did the research. Other scientists that we know and love, they were the voice for these concepts, but they were not the researcher. And in today's time, which is amazing that these people will think this, they'll support these Linnaean people, but if they were in a postdoc situation and they made a discovery and then they gave it to their advisor, their confidant, whoever it is, and that person then went on the internet and said, hey yo, look what I got, you would be hot. You would be angry, you'd be ready to fight, you would be calling all sorts of shenanigans. But when we think of your heroes, you know, these again are not the Avengers. They're not the X-Men, and they're definitely not the Justice League, right? I mean, they're almost as bad as the Justice League movies, but we're not going to go too deep into that. So it should be something that we relinquish. We relinquish this chokehold we have on these people to fit the narrative that we have written in our heads. I have heroes in my life that I've had to realize were not who I thought they were, and that hurts.
It hurts.
It hurts because you have a deep-seated belief, and this is more of a psychological mindset. I'm not the crazy psychologist. Somebody should go ahead and capture that name, though. But the deep-seated belief you have within you that said this person is this, you put their perception onto them. With that, those who are in these institutions, especially like in the botany and ethnobotany field, which is a mostly white field, have to look at themselves and say, how much sense does it make as an ethnobotanist to teach plants and society, how they all interact across this here world, that we are only entering or entertaining information that is of a European origin?
It's like an insult to the field that you claim to be a part of if it stops there.
You know,
if the critical thinking stops there.
It's an insult to yourself.
Yes.
If it stops
yes,
there.
Yes.
And I think that's just kind of the thing. We have to look at our ideals and ourselves, like really in a reflective manner. Self-reflect and say, what can I do to better myself and then be better for the science that I'm writing for? Because if you're like, this takes away from science and that's your mindset, what you're doing is actually taking away from the science because you're not entertaining a conversation that needs to be had. And that is detracting from science. That is leading to folly.
Well, people were saying, you know, elitism didn't, you know, this had nothing to do with elitism, that there was not, you know, of course, Latin, once that became the language of the learned, it didn't erase indigenous languages. And it's like, for me to believe that were true, I would have to then say, okay, so what, 18th century botanists looked at indigenous language on the same level of respect?
18th century botanists look at those indigenous people
with the same level of respect. Yes. And so it's like, we know that that's not true. So, but then it's like, while they're saying that elitism didn't exist, they're like, well, where are your credentials? It's like, don't you see that you're following in the same damn footsteps?
You are. And I think we shouldn't be so blinded by the darkness of the science that we just ignore everything. Because again, I seen the comments. They asked for your credentials. I then gave mine. They said, what are you trying to say? I'm a botanist. You wanted one, here you go. The Bible says, ask and you shall receive. Here I am. Rock you like a hurricane. What do you want to know, right?
Yeah.
And they didn't like that because they just really wanted to take away from you, which is again what those 18th century botanists would have done, because we didn't see no 18th century female botanists, right?
Sure.
There wasn't any of them that were just truly respected and widespread in that time. So they just are doing the same thing.
I noticed that your presence, being both an expert and a black man, short-circuited some people here.
Oh, of course it did, because they're like, you a whole botanist? I have a degree. Because one of them asked, I wanted to say, I'll show it to you, bro.
Yeah.
I hang it on my wall. I rub it every night for good luck. And every morning I touch it. And I say, ooh, I feel it, Jesus. And I touch my bachelor's every morning. And if you don't believe I have it, I dare you, person that doesn't believe I have a bachelor's, to put in on the $40,000 of student loans I got. If every one of you who hate against me put in $1,000, I can be out of debt and you can feel better about yourself. So it could work out. And they were so bothered.
Yes.
They were so hot because you don't expect to see a black botanist, much less one that looks like me. I am not the picture, the age of the pictures we see of George Washington Carver, where we only see pictures of him in his 60s and 70s. I am not clean cut and shaven. I am vivacious. I am loud. I am me. I don't let the science stifle me up to say this is what the mold that a scientist should be. I don't do that. I don't have that time.
Right.
So,
because also science didn't create that mold. It was
didn't.
actually the people who, the scientists in the past who
exactly.
created that mold.
And I can't live in that mold.
Yeah.
I can't live in any mold. I think the thing we haven't really unearthed is it's more than just the science in Linnaeus. It's you're affecting my whiteness. You're hurting my whiteness. My privilege is sore. And now, because I am raw, like my skin is red and I'm bleeding, but from your words, I now have to aggress you and attack you so you feel what I feel.
Right.
And the thing is, that typically doesn't bother me. There's some days where it do, but typically, I tough skin, it ain't gonna go through. So you're wasting your time, and again, you could direct that energy towards, why am I so bothered?
Exactly.
And that's where we just keep going into, why are you so bothered? And then unpack that emotion and say what's wrong with it. Well, versus responding because you feel that emotion and you're like, what is bothering you about this? Like, is it because, it's making me feel guilty? Well, you shouldn't. You haven't had interactions with these people, so you therefore are not a contributing factor to this from their doing it. But you are contributing when you sit here and you make false arguments and unnecessary ugly comments to somebody because your favorite person was racist. Like, it therefore makes me believe you are also racist.
The biggest trolls in this comment thread were white men.
Oh yeah, they were.
And it's like having that moment of reflection and being like, who am I as a white man telling a BIPOC platform that this history of BIPOC people isn't important enough because it's detracting from the sciences. When you are furthering, the fact that this continues to stay buried, like you're piling on the dirt on top of this.
Exactly.
And it's like, then you are implicated in this.
Of course. You are piling the dirt, and it's not just a dirt onto a random dirt pile. This is a mound that is covering up the dead bodies. These dead bodies are the dead ideas, cultural concepts, and other factoids and potential important knowledge that came from these indigenous non-European peoples. And there has to be a point where you just stop it. You, again, reflect. And I keep saying that because sometimes repetition helps things to stick for people.
Right.
You reflect on yourself and say, let me make a change. Let me adapt.
Yes.
Let me evolve, should I say. Evolve into something that is a better form of me.
So Derek, now I wanted to ask you about what you thought of social media, or specifically even, we could talk about social media as a whole, but also just Instagram as a platform to have some of these conversations.
These conversations are tough. I can say I can't remember his name, so I'm not going to put him out there so he doesn't get hate, but I can't remember his name. There was one dude, we were going back and forth. He messaged me and said something to the effect of, do you just generally go into Fitch role when you're doing stuff? And I was like, well, yeah, I do. When it's something like this, I don't have time to tap dance around with you and try to just coddle you and say, woo, 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 come and see. You're not a child. But if you want to have an adult conversation, I'm going to give you the straight, real facts. And after a conversation with him where I said, like, she's not saying, and I'm not saying that this system doesn't work. Yeah. We're simply saying its foundation is jacked up. He said, you know what? I get it. I'm sorry. Really? And we were able to come to a place of understanding to say, you know what? I definitely get that. Because he even said he was trying to do some work with, fighting colonialism and sciences. And he's like, I guess I just got some more work to do on myself because I didn't see it. Like, he was able to see it. So I reached one. Now, the rest of them still wanted to come at me sideways. And I don't mind because I'm diagonal. Okay, some of y'all going to catch that later. But he got it. Yeah. And that was good enough for me. It can be potentially a beautiful way to have these conversations and to educate people, because where there's people who are angry and mad and we're focused on them, there are also people who are in the comments who are like, thank you, like this is it, like thanks for talking about it, or I didn't know this, or whatever. and they're able to get that information. And again, they may take it in and never talk about it again, but at least somebody was reached.
Right. And that's what I'm hoping for. That's all we can hope for. Are there any other questions that you have? Any other points that you wanted to make?
I generally, when people ask me this question, I try to summarize everything because that's what we should do.
It's worth repeating.
So, in addition to teaching this system, in addition to talking about it, we need to be able to candidly speak on the issues and the problematic past of this system. And that is, again, that due to these white botanists of the time having these white conversations at white tables, black folks weren't invited to the table. They didn't even know the table existed. They didn't know the restaurant, the room that held the table was there because they were not considered, right? And as such, their input, which could have been phenomenally useful and could have changed where we are today with our biological sciences, is not there. It's not added. And we instead have people who discovered, quote unquote, plants that were existing in a land that they were not in, and they put a name on it or their own name on it or some combination therein, and they just went on about their way. And again, we celebrate these people, we laud these people as our heroes, as our greats, as the fathers of whatever. But we're not in the late 60s, the early 70s. Father doesn't know best. And as such, we have to be able to adapt and evolve just as our biological sciences do, just as our concepts and understanding of sciences do, to get better and to understand better.
Yes.
Yeah, bingo bongo.
Thank you so much for joining me. Thank you so much for making the time to come out here and to talk about this. And it's like, this is the first time we've been able to actually sit down and talk. I mean, it's like,
it looks like we've known each other for years.
I know,
huh?
it's incredible. Amazing. It is incredible. I thank you for your time, for your knowledge, for the work that you've been doing.
Thank you.
Because you really are, you're impacting through TikTok, through Instagram. So thank you.
Thank you. And I want to also thank you because I share often a lot of your stuff. I love it because you're making it digestible, just as I try to. And it is in a different way, but we need all these ways to be able to reach people and to make a better change. I'm here for it.
Jerry, thank you so much.
Thank you,
too. Thank you.